Years ago, a TEDx changed the course of my life. A guy from San Francisco named Scott Dinsmore talked about how to find a job you really love. At that time, I was sitting in my office desk in Bogota, Colombia, unmotivated and wondering if life was done once you check all the boxes that society makes us believe we have to check. I would read his newsletter every Monday. He talked about having a fulfilling life, leaving our mark in the world, finding purpose. It was very inspiring. It inspired me to quit my job and go traveling around the world for a year. That TEDx started a journey that has lasted over a decade and brings me here today, using my voice with a confidence I didn't have before. In 2015, while traveling, Scott had an accident and he passed away. It crushed me. I grieved for him like one would grieve for a close friend. And that was hard to explain to my friends and family because we never actually met in person. I convinced myself that I had to step up and do something about it to continue his mission. I was also worried that no one was going to continue his mission with the same passion that he had. At the same time I thought about it, I also thought, but who am I to pretend I can be like this remarkable man born in California? I am just a Latino girl following someone's blog. But I didn't listen to that voice, and I became a coach. And I decided to focus my practice on his principles. And in doing so, I realized something was missing. Scott was convinced that by truly getting to know ourselves, surrounding ourselves with the right people, and doing our impossible, taking consistent action, we could achieve our dreams. But there is something he missed. The framework works, but it's not enough. Of course, privilege and inequality play a big role in how easy or not it is for someone to achieve their dreams. But there is something else holding us back, and it's not laziness. Not enough people are talking about this, but it's not an issue with commitment. It's not a problem with time management or a lack of focus. What is holding us back are the stories behind our fears. Fears really have a really bad reputation, but they are not the problem. To help me uncover the stories that we unconsciously tell ourselves, I have used a tool developed by doctors Lisa Leahy and Richard Keegan from Harvard University. This tool is called Keegan Matrix. We start by talking with the person, uncovering what they want to achieve or they want to change, something that they truly want. We move on to talk about their behaviors, their fears, and then we finish uncovering the story behind those fears. The results and observations I've had using this tool are truly interesting. In my practice, I've had the chance to listen to hundreds of moving stories from people around the world. One of the stories was a lady. She shared with me that when she was little, her little sister was very ill and her parents were taking care of her sister. They were very busy and worried. And she noticed that. And she didn't want to be a burden. So she made a commitment to herself and said, I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to be a burden. Her biggest fear was to be rejected. So she had a story in her head. I will not ask for help. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be rejected. The problem was that today she is a leader and she is struggling with delegation. She was struggling to ask for a promotion at work. One after the other, every person was arriving to describe a very similar fear, regardless of their gender, their country of origin, the generation. And I started to see a pattern that led me to a conclusion. Although our stories are all very similar, but our fears are all the same. We are not talking about physical fears. It's not about the fear of dying or falling, or the fear of snakes or spiders or heights. I'm talking about psychological fears, the ones we learn from our personal experiences, or the context in the family, or the culture we grew up in. The fear of not being worthy, the fear of being rejected, the fear of not being enough, the fear of not being loved or liked. But how do we get to uncover that? A conversation with someone who was struggling with procrastination, even if they really claimed they wanted to do that pending thing. It will go like this. I'll start by asking the behaviors, and then we will move into fears, and then the surface level fears would appear, like the fear of making mistakes, fear of failing, fear of not being respected. But if I continue asking, what happens if you fail? That person would say, they will judge me. And I'll keep on asking, what happens if they judge you? They will reject me. And I kept going. What happens if they reject you? No one would love me. I'll be left alone. So what's the story they were carrying? I would rather not try anything than fail. Because if I fail, no one will love me. I would be left alone. To change the story, it means that they were able to say, I deserve to try. And if I fail, people who care about me would love me anyway. In another story, my client considered herself a people pleaser. She was struggling to set boundaries, to be true to herself, to be authentic to what she really wanted. We uncovered that her biggest fear was not being liked. And the story in her head, this was interesting. When she was little, she listened many times to the same story about grandma. Her grandma immigrated from Europe to the United States many years ago. She had to change her name so that she could find a job, because her nationality was not welcome then. She was not allowed to speak her native language outside of the home. She'll be rejected. She could even lose her job. It was a matter of survival. And because this person listened to that story many times when she was little, she had a story in her mind. Who we are is not accepted. We have to do whatever people ask to be liked. The story she had to create, I deserve to be accepted as I am, like everyone else. We have a profound relationship with our fears because there is a story connected to them. We don't need to overcome our fears. Because they are like guardians in a temple, and inside the temple there's this story. Most people stop at surface level fears, like the fear of failure. They see it and they run away. But instead of running away, go deeper, find the deeper fears. Inside that, there is a story. That's the story you need to change. Having these conversations and talking about our fears and the stories behind them can be very uncomfortable. But it's also truly impactful. Something interesting that happens when we are talking about fears is that many of us get stressed out, our bodies contract, as if we were experiencing fear right then. Raise your hand if some of you are stressed out right now. Yes. But we should, instead of avoiding these conversations, talk about our fears more often. After all, we all share the same fears. In one way or another, they make us human. Behind our fears, there is a story. We created that story. Most often, back when we were 7 or 11 years old. And very often, that story was somehow true. But it's not true anymore. That's the story holding you back. I, for example, as a daughter of a single mother, born in the 80s, I was rejected by my aunts because I was a child born outside of marriage. They were ashamed and afraid of what people would think. And even if I don't remember the details, I do remember I didn't have a dad. And I grew up believing there was something wrong with me. The story in my head was that I had to earn love by being perfect. Perfectionism became my tool to hide a huge fear of not being loved. Raise your hand if you ever experienced that fear. Thank you, I'm not alone. And that strategy worked until it didn't. I experienced burnout. I had constant conflicts with the people I love. I had constant headaches. It became too costly for my well-being not to make a change. Standing here in front of you is possible because I changed the story in my head from I need to be perfect to be loved to I choose to love every part of myself. The amygdala, a part of our brain that helps us process fear, develops when we are little, about 7 years old. Let's imagine that the voice of our fears like the voice of the kid we were at 7. The prefrontal cortex develops or finishes developing when we are about 25. That's our adult rational mind. To change the story that is stop self-sabotaging yourself and stop limiting yourself, it means that we use our adult rational mind to comfort and calm the inner child. It is like we all have two voices in our head, the inner child and the adult. Without realizing it, it's like our 7-year-old self is making decisions truly they shouldn't be making. On the contrary, there are moments in our lives when we need to bring the joy and the fun, and that's when we should be bringing them. Now, think of something you really want to achieve or change. Think of the fears you believe are holding you back. And now, or anytime you have the chance, think deeper. Find the deeper fears, those you never talk about. Bring them to light. Then talk to your 7-year-old self. Be friends with them. And try to remember the story you created to protect yourself from those fears. That's the story you need to change. When we start uncovering these stories, even just sharing them with a friend, with a coach, or writing them down, that can make a powerful difference. My favorite quote from Scott Dinsmore is, "If you don't know what you're looking for, you're never going to find it." Today, I want to ask you, or I want to invite you, to go find two things. First, reflect on your fears, the ones that make you human. And second, try to remember the story you created to protect yourself from those fears. I know some stories are harder to change than others, but it's worth trying. Thank you.